This is the note-taking guide for day 2 of the statistics unit in Math for Life. So not a lot of work to do on this note-taking guide today, just a lot of talking and explaining of different things. What we're doing here today is doing the types of sampling methods and study types. So in statistics, anytime we want to figure out some statistical math, we have to have something that we're collecting data from. A sample question, a study, a survey, those kinds of things. Statistics is the science of collecting, organizing, and summarizing, and then analyzing information to draw conclusions or answer questions. So the very first thing you're going to do when we're talking about statistics is we're going to identify the question that we're going to ask. We're going to collect the data, organize and summarize, and then come to a conclusion. So today what I'm going to talk about is how you're going to collect some of that data. There's different ways to do that. The first way to collect data would be a survey. Now, I think most of you have been involved in a survey before. It says here on our paper here that collecting data by asking members of the sample questions via an interview or a written form, or taking a poll to learn who people will vote for in an upcoming election would be an example of that. So I think that you've walked into a class before and maybe been handed a piece of paper that says, will you please take this survey? Or you receive a questionnaire after you eat a meal at a restaurant. Those kinds of things. Those would be surveys when someone asks you to physically write down the answers to questions, or would sit down and interview you and ask you questions. So that's what a survey is. The second one here we're going to talk about today is an experimental study. And what it says right there on your paper says, divide the sample into 2 groups randomly. One group receives the treatment while the other does not, which would be called the controlled group. Compare results of the treated group with results from the control group. So an experimental study would be where you actually experiment with something. So the example they gave you was seeing whether or not a drug would work. So half of the people get the real drug, half of the people get a placebo, meaning a fake drug. And then you're going to use that group to determine whether or not that drug worked by comparing the 2 results of the 2 groups. So again, experimental study is when you actually do an experiment to see whether or not a statement is true. All right, the third kind that we can do is called an observational study. An observational study is where collecting data by observing or watching things that are happening. Members of the study are not affected by their participation. So studying the relationship between ACT scores and success in Math 1050. You might research and collect scores, but you aren't really trying to change anything. You can do comparisons with various data, but you aren't doing something to one of the groups that you're not doing to the other groups. And you're not observing differences between the two groups. So observational study is when you're just watching or grabbing information from something that's already happened. All right, so there's different ways to get those samples, and we're going to talk about a whole bunch of them today. So the first one is called convenience. So a lot of time when we do statistics, we are looking for the convenient way to do it, the convenient group to sample. And so convenient sample is when you use people that you have access to. You need to do a survey for your stats class, so you survey the 5 friends that you hang out with the day before. Or for convenience would be something like setting a table up at the mall, and you give your survey to the people that walk by. So if we were going to do a convenient survey in class today, we could ask the first 5 people who come to class, how did you travel to school today? And your choices would be bus, car, walk, bike, or other. We would ask the first 5 people, we would write those results down. And you could take a minute and do that right now if you wanted to. Pause the video and ask the first 5 people who walked into class how they got to school, and then just kind of write your results down. The second way would be self-selected. Now, self-selected doesn't seem to me that it would be a very practical way to collect data, because then you're not getting to choose your study group. They kind of choose themselves for you, but you literally just ask for volunteers. Could ask for volunteers verbally on a flyer, via email, etc. It gives people the possibility of responding if they want to or not. Sometimes there is an incentive offered to get volunteers to participate. I know I've seen flyers around before that say looking for people to have wisdom teeth removed for a survey on a drug afterwards. So the only people that would ever apply for that would be somebody who would volunteer that would need their wisdom teeth removed. So self-selected would be where they're volunteering on their own. An example of that today in class could be if we asked the first 5 people who volunteered their answer, how did you travel to school today? So I could stand up in front of the class, ask that question. The first 5 people to raise their hand would be the first 5 people that I would take that information from. All right, another method is called systematic. So systematic is usually when you use every nth person. So it would be like every 3rd person that walks in the room, I'm going to ask a question to. Every 20th person that comes to the football stadium, I'm going to ask the question to. You're systematic about how you do it. You can determine what the n value is by thinking about the percent of population you want to include. If you want 25% of the population to be sampled, then you would want 1 in 4 people, so ask every 4th person. If you wanted to include 10% of the population, you should sample 1 in every 10 people. So a systematic question that could be used today in class would be, did you eat breakfast today? And instead of asking you that, I'm going to ask only every 5th person on the roll whether or not they had breakfast today. You can take the results as yes or no. You could do tally marks or however you wanted to do it, but we would ask every 5th person on the roll. All right, the next kind of method that we're going to talk about is a cluster. If we would just read what's going on up here to kind of explain it, says if there is some natural grouping occurring, you could select groups instead of selecting individuals. Our desks are in rows. Instead of selecting 4 individuals, you could select a row. And the sample would be all of the members of the row. So today's cluster sample, I could say, I'm going to select the first row of tables to participate in this. And maybe I could ask them how many cheese balls they thought were in this container right here. So again, I'm only going to select a cluster of the people in the group today, or a part of the classroom according to some cluster they're already grouped into. All right, we're now to simple random. We're going to talk about what simple random is, and then the next one is stratified random. So simple random is everyone has an equally likely chance of being selected for the sample. So drawing someone's name out of a hat, or putting numbers in and drawing them from a number generator on the computer, that kind of thing. So simple random is where we're just going to try to grab them out as random as possible. So a simple random thing we could use in class today would be drawing your number out of a hat. We could say how many letters are in your first name. As we drew your name out of the hat, we could write the letters in the first name, and we could actually find some results of that data this time. We could do mean and median of the numbers that were pulled out of the hat, or the letters in the names, and we could find median and mode. I'm not going to do that with you today because I'm not there with you in the classroom, but that's kind of what simple random is where you're going to just kind of draw it out of a hat or use a random number generator, those kinds of things. All right, the last method we're going to talk about today is stratified random. Random, but makes sure each group has proportionate representation. So if you want to sample students from the school, you might want to make sure you ask sophomores, juniors, and seniors that are represented there. If you're going to select a group of people from your classroom, you might want to make sure that not only did you select girls, but you selected boys. If you wanted to select only girls, maybe you want to make sure you have redheads, blondes, brunettes. Make sure that you're trying to get a good variety of each kind of person that exists. So the example of that today would be making sure you get male and female, when you ask what the eye color is. All right, that was a lot of information that I've gone over with you today. So what I've created for you here on the next 2 pages are study tips for you. They kind of tell you what a survey is, what an experimental survey is, what an observational study is. And then on the next cheat sheet, I have each of the methods here for you. That kind of gives you a picture that reminds you how each of these methods is picked. Thanks for listening. Good luck on your homework today, you guys.